Sometimes I'll watch a prospect and pretty quickly I'll get an idea formulated as to where I think they're going to be graded once I'm all done watching them. And the reality is that it actually happens more often than not. Usually after maybe watching 2 of a prospect's games, I have a pretty good idea already of where I feel like I'm going to grade them. But then there are some times, every once in a while, where I think I'm going to start off grading somebody somewhere, then I end up initially grading them there, but something doesn't feel right, something doesn't sit right. Like, I've either feeling like maybe I graded them too low or too high, either way, so I go back and watch them again. And then my grade the second time is entirely different, higher or lower, and I really don't know what the heck to think. And I'm really torn as to which version of me was right, the first one or the second one. And it happens. Marcell Ateman, Oklahoma State. Perfect example of this for me. The first time I went through and graded him, I was like, you know what? I can see it. The second time I went through and graded him, because the first time just didn't seem right. It felt odd. I'm like, if I'm grading him here, yet I don't really feel it, like deep down, like convicted in it, then maybe there's something wrong. So I go back and watch him a second time, and then the grade doesn't match up. So I'm going to be perfectly blunt and honest with you. I don't know what the hell to make of my grade of Marcell Ateman. I don't know what the hell to think about him as a prospect. As he's got the size of a traditional outside number 1 wide receiver. So this is a guy that you send out there. He could be a red zone threat. You anticipate him being able to go get the 50-50 balls, the jump balls, make tough contested catches. He's got a decent-sized route tree, even with the concerns of playing in that Oklahoma State system where they can kind of keep it basic, and the design of what they do allows wide receivers to get open. He did show me that he has a decent-sized route tree, and he's an adequate route runner for a bigger wide receiver. He did show the ability to win the chicken fights against physical coverage. He did a pretty good job, what I saw, using his hands, which is something you like to see. To me, there's nothing worse than a bigger, slower wide receiver that can't use his size, his frame, to get off of press coverage, to get off of tight coverage. You see those guys sometimes and you're like, why the hell are you playing wide receiver? How the hell can you not use your greatest asset, your greatest strength, to your advantage? Ateman does. And as referenced about the 50-50 balls, the jump balls, he's got a large catch radius. He's able to high point the ball. He's able to go up and get the jump balls, adjust to the ball pretty well. Those type of things that you want to see out of a bigger wide receiver. Because if they're not a Calvin Johnson type, you know, the guys like Ateman's and so many others that have that kind of size profile but not the quickest or fastest, they're going to have to win in other ways. And he's another type of guy that has to win in different ways. Once he gets the ball in his hands, he can break some tackles by running through them because he is a big guy. So he's going to be bigger than most of the defensive backs that are trying to tackle him, and not that much smaller than, frankly, some of the linebackers trying to tackle him. So those are things that each time I watched him stood out to me, and I'm like, okay, I can see initially why I was high on him. But then I go and I look, and he's got a lack of quickness and speed, so he's not going to be a real big-time vertical weapon, and it creates those concerns to me about whether or not a guy is going to be able to separate at the NFL level. And I know some people thought that he was going to run faster at the combine than he did. I felt like, honestly, the time that we saw in the 40 at the combine more closely matched the reality of what we saw on film. So I don't feel like that 40 time in and of itself should have been a huge disqualifier because it matched his reality as a prospect. So it shouldn't have had an impact on the grade. It should have been a validation of the ranking or the grade one way or another. And one thing that's frustrating me about, not just him, a lot of the wide receivers in this class in general. I cannot remember a class of wide receivers that I've seen that have so many guys that can't catch the ball with their hands on a consistent basis, especially the basic catches. Not just the off balance, not just the spectacular, not just the one hand, and not just the leaning 6 ways from Sunday catch, but the basic catch in front of you. So many of these guys don't catch the ball with their hands consistently in this draft class. So many of these guys don't attack the ball with their hands, and Ateman's another one of them. He's not as bad as some of the prospects that I've called out, surely, but he could be better. And I just don't understand why so many of these guys let the ball get so close into their body, and so many of them are frankly body catchers. He's not a true body catcher all the way, but he has plenty of times he lets the ball get in too close to him, which as a result leads to him body catching. And I've outlined with several other prospects this year for the wide receiver class why that's a concern. You're also talking about as a prospect, he's going to be 24 in 2018, so he's not the youngest guy, and he's not as refined as, let's say, a Calvin Ridley. So even though you're talking about Calvin Ridley potentially being a first-round pick at 24 years of age as a rookie, you're saying, ooh, you're not going to get as much out of him for as long as you would with others. At least you feel like Calvin Ridley could come in and contribute right away. Like he could be a guy you can plug in day one potentially, and he could do some things. Where I'm not sure that's the case with Ateman. So if it takes him 2 to 3 years to get up to speed, he's already 26, 27 years of age, and then what the hell good does it do you? You could have drafted a kid at 21 with a similar size but better athletic package, take 2 to 3 years to develop him, and then he's only 23 or 24, and he's just starting to figure it out. He's still on the upslope of his career, not at the plateau and potentially the downslope. He also played in that Oklahoma State system, played with Mason Rudolph, he played with James Washington, so that no doubt created opportunities, played under Mike Gundy, he knows what he's doing on the offensive side of the ball, and played against some soft-ass Big 12 defenses. Let's just call it how it is. The Big 12 plays a bunch of soft defense, and teams are putting up 60, 70 points a damn game, it seems like sometimes. So how much of that was a byproduct, a direct result of that? It's a fair question to ask. So as I've been trying to rack my brain around grading this kid, I'm like, initially, I thought he was quite a bit better than James Washington. Now, I don't think he's as much better. Might be just a shade. I still feel like he's a little bit of a better prospect for the NFL compared to his teammate Washington, but not much. The ability to win the chicken fights with that size might help him as opposed to some of the bigger wide receivers that don't have the quickness and speed and the quality of route running overall to be able to separate on a consistent basis. He has enough of that to be able to, and at least with his size, he uses his size well. He's got that large catch radius. He can win the 50-50 balls, adjust to the ball, go get the ball at his highest point. So there are those points that I come back and I'm like, man, I feel like maybe my grade should be higher. So I've kind of like broken even here. I've given him a grade of an 84.5. Puts him squarely in the third round conversation. I can't go any higher at this point, especially when I saw the combine. And usually as a general rule, I like to not be too influenced by the combine. To me, again, as I've talked about with the 40 times and the other 3-cone and shuttle drills and the field drills, to me those should be more of a validation of what you've seen on film, not something that is a discovery for you. But Marcell Ateman was like historically bad in that gauntlet at the combine. And everybody's got a bad day, and sometimes they have those bad days at the worst time. But he was really, really bad. So I would be really, really stunned if he is even picked on day 2 in this draft. The guy he kind of reminds me of a little bit is Devin Funchess when he came out of Michigan, now with the Carolina Panthers. A guy that was productive in college, but lacked the quickness and the speed that showed up on film consistently to be able to get a ton of separation, wasn't the best route runner. Similarities there. Not a perfect comparison, but I do feel like there are similarities there. Now, you had some people thinking Devin Funchess, he was a little bit bigger, frankly, that he might have to convert to tight end at the NFL level. So some people may still feel like he's playing a little bit out of position. I don't know if we're going to get that same type of talk with a Marcell Ateman needing to potentially convert to another position. But like I said, I like him still a little bit more than James Washington, but not as much as I initially did. And I really don't know what the hell to make out of my grading for him. I'm either going to feel really glad in a couple of years because I didn't put that high second-round grade on him that I initially had, or I'm going to feel like a clown when he's one of the 5 most productive wide receivers in this draft. That's the fun of the thing, and that's the nature of the beast. You just don't know. And that's the truth a lot of times. We just don't know.